Yo, what up, Russ here, and my boy is back. That's right, in years and years and years of waiting, Shadow is finally back to the forefront of his own game. In this latest release, Sonic X Shadow Generations, or Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, I'm still not sure what the right way to say it is. But either way, Shadow reprises his starring role in this new repackaged bundle of Sonic Generations, which released back in 2011. This time around, it's been remastered with some small tweaks and put together in a package with a whole new story that's based around Shadow himself. I'd imagine this was done to coincide with the latest movie that's coming out at the time of recording this, Sonic 3. That is going to be Shadow's big screen debut, so why not build the hype even more by putting him in his own game again? But does the package live up to not only the hype, but also the nostalgia that comes with this game and these characters as well? Or should it have been left back in time? Let's talk about it. All right, so before we get to Shadow, which let's be honest, let's be honest, he's the reason 90% of us are even buying this game in the first place. But for those unfamiliar, let's take a quick look back at Sonic Generations. As I alluded to before, this is a game that released over a decade ago now. Oh my God, okay. This game was released in conjunction with the 20th anniversary of the Sonic franchise and was meant to be a celebration of sorts of that. We're past the 30th celebration now, so let that sink in. Here, Sonic takes center stage, but it's not just one. You actually have two Sonics. Yeah, modern Sonic, which is the version we've been rocking with since the Dreamcast and all his different iterations. But you also have classic Sonic, the little ball of attitude that you remember all the way back in Genesis days. That's if you're old enough to remember that is. In this game, you'll hop between the shoes of both Sonics, speeding through levels and fighting bosses from Sonic's history all the way up to, well, that point at the time. And honestly, it's a concept that's yet to be done as well since this game has come out.
It's a concept.
The game is split up into three different eras: the classic Genesis era, the Dreamcast era, and the modern era. Would you consider it modern now? I mean, I guess. Yeah, it still makes sense. Each one has two acts. Act 1 is classic Sonic, which is your classic 2D side-scrolling, platforming, spin-dashing action. And Act 2 is modern Sonic, which is the formula most people are familiar with by now. The 3D boosting, drifting, home and attacking, high-speed obstacle courses that also switches to a 2D perspective for those platforming sections. Quite often in this game, actually. And all of these levels are remixed to some degree. No matter what era they come from, they are changed and altered while still trying to keep what made that level special in its original design. And this extends to the soundtrack as well. Classic tracks of levels, bosses, and beyond are brought back with altered arrangements that really play into the style of the Sonic that you're currently playing as. Classic Sonic's tracks are definitely more EDM, dance, pop focused. While modern Sonic's tracks play up to that classic rock and full orchestration. In addition to that, you can also choose different songs that you want to play on whatever level you want. All of it is still a joy to listen to and zoom around to still after all this time. There's a reason why these songs have lasted forever. It's because they're really good. They're really good. And the remixes, if they don't make them better, they're just as good. To talk about the story very quickly, it's Sonic's birthday, or it was at the time, and all his friends are throwing him a surprise party. However, things quickly go awry as this entity called the Time Eater pulls up and says, I'm gonna shut this down right now. Sonic and his friends are sucked into the void and spread across time and space in the process. However, he quickly meets up with Tails, and very soon after that, they meet with their Genesis counterparts or their classic counterparts, and it is up to him and himself to literally speed through time and space to save everything. Is this the most complex story? No, not by a long shot. Is it the best story? Even for a Sonic game, no. I personally think there's some others that surpass this one. However, it's enough to give you a reason as to why you're speeding through the past as two different versions of Sonic, no less. And personally, I don't really need one. Like, did you really need to know the complete context of what was going on in Sonic 1, 2, and 3? Chances are probably not. Just give me the controls and let me run face first into a bagnet. Multiple times. Now, this is a remaster, and that naturally comes with a plethora of changes, upgrades, updates, all that sorts of stuff. Well, from playing this, to call this a remaster is kind of a stretch. Now, that's not really a bad thing. The game never looked bad to begin with way back then, but as a remaster, I was hoping for a little bit more in terms of graphical prowess, at least a noticeable one without having to like do a side-by-side comparison. The most it seems like we get is like this weird glow on characters, something that's very prominent in Shadow's portion of the game. And I experienced quite a bit of especially in Act 1 or Classic Sonic's levels, to the point where it's kind of making me nauseous a little bit. Now, for transparency, I play this on PC, and I know my PC isn't the beefiest thing out there, but I can run most games at high settings, if not better. However, this is still my experience with the game and what I noticed. Now, as far as what's noticeable that they changed, immediately you'll see they changed the controls. Certain actions have been swapped around on the control scheme, basically to match what they're doing in the Shadow portion of this game. Shadow has a lot more he can do compared to Sonic, and to keep that consistent across the board, they just decided to rework Sonic's controls altogether. It's something that you can quickly get used to. It's just something I noticed, and you'll notice if you are instinctually familiar with past Sonic games. However, I don't know if it's just because I haven't played this game in a long time, but the controls feel a lot less responsive than I last remember. I can't count how many deaths I had because a homing attack or an air dash didn't come out when I pressed the button, or I got sent into a wall into my death when I was trying to do a homing attack, or I got sent to I don't know where the as well as boosting didn't always trigger, or it triggered late, and jumps felt late as well. There's a couple of times where like, I know this timing, I've played this game so many times, and the response didn't react how I was expecting to. I don't know, am I just trash? Or have some of you out there that have played this game noticed some things too? If you have, let me know. Aside from that though, there isn't lives anymore, so there isn't a life counter, although you can still buy them at the shop. Don't know what that's about. So you can't really lose this game anymore like you could in the past. That carries over into Shadow as well. Dialogue has been changed up in this game. There are either new lines or some of the old lines have new deliveries to them. And lastly, they've added chows to this game. You'll find them spread throughout the level to collect, in addition to all the other collectibles that were already in the game. There's a ton of them. You can spend a lot of time getting these things, especially if you're a completionist. That's where a lot of your time is going to come from, trying to get all the collectibles that this game has to offer. But that's about it. The Sonic Generations portion of this release feels more of like a direct re-release than like a remaster. There's some add-ons here and there to make it feel somewhat newer, but for the most part, it's the same game, which is still good for those of you that have not played this game. You get to experience pretty much the same game we got to experience back when it released. But yeah, that's about it. I didn't want to spend too much time on this because, again, it's an older game. A lot of us have already played it. Just wanted to give a little context for those of you that might not know what this game is. But you know what time it is. A reason we're all here. Shadow Generations. And yes, technically they are separate games. When you boot this up, at least on the PC, aside from like the menu that lets you choose which one, they load separate applications. So they are technically separate games. It's not like a add-on to the Sonic Generations game. But yes, Shadow is starring in his own game again. Although not for very long. But starring nonetheless. Yeah, this game is about 3 to 5 hours. If we're just being straight up. That's it. You can probably get a little bit more depending on how thorough you are with this game, because there are a lot of collectibles just like there were in Sonic Generations, probably even more so here. But as far as the main story is concerned, it's over in a single evening. And speaking of the story, this plot actually takes place alongside Shadow Generations. The same time eater that messed with Sonic decided to f around and find out with Shadow, and essentially does the same thing. It sends Shadow to a void in space and time, and he has to correct it, just like Sonic did. However, Shadow's story does go a bit further in this one. For those of you in the Sonic fandom, you know how deep and convoluted Shadow's backstory kinda has been made out to be in the past. Yeah, you know what you did. You know what you did. This game sets out to clarify certain details, rectify missteps, and overall bring closure to not only us as fans of the character, but to Shadow himself. The main players in Shadow's story for the past, 20 some odd years now, all take center stage here and help bring this character full circle. And it's really cool to see Shadow finally be portrayed as the character it seemed like he was really meant to be when he was introduced to us all that time ago. And also just thought about it. This is how you do a human and hedgehog story. This is probably the most heartfelt human hedgehog interaction that we've had since Sonic Adventure 2. They definitely tried again to varying degrees of success, depending on who you ask, but none of it holds a candle to what's in this game. And it's not that much of it, but what's here is really, really good. Now, don't get me wrong. My boy may be humbled, but he still be f***ing shit up. Those shoes just aren't for skating, my boy. There are a lot of things that you'll immediately notice when you start this game up, especially if you're coming from the Sonic portion. And the first thing is that they slowed my boy down. They held him back. At least when referring to his default running speed, he's a lot slower. He can still boost like Sonic and come close, if not match him, but overall, he's a slower moving character now. If you play Sonic Frontiers, it's about the same as Sonic's default running speed in that game. However, once you take a look at how the game is designed, it kind of makes sense as to why. If anything, they might have taken a few cues from Frontiers and applied them here, because Shadow's level design is a lot more expansive compared to Sonic's, from the individual levels to the hub world especially. This is actually a fully 3D realized hub world as compared to like the linear path that you got before. It's a fully explorable space, and there's quite a bit to do here aside from like going from level to level and tackling the challenge gates like before. There are so many different pathways here that lead to different collectibles. There are hidden areas to discover. The map is filled with multiple different side activities and challenges like Ubisoft made the game. You have a fucking map for this place. This is somewhere the devs really want you to spend time and discover all there is to offer here. And it's probably like that to make up for the lack of main levels, because there aren't that many. If we had to take a tally of everything, Sonic had 18 levels, not including bosses. Shadow has 16, including that shit. And you know what? It makes sense. Sonic has more history to pull from than Shadow does. Heck, just to fill the game out, they had to pull from and make levels around Sonic Forces, which he was barely in, and Sonic Frontiers, which he wasn't in at all. Unless there's something I missed. But while there might not be as many levels, Shadow's levels have a lot more going on in them. You're not about to speed through these as easily. Shadow's levels focus a lot more on navigation and platforming as opposed to just outright speed. His 2D portions played pretty similar to Sonic, just with, you know, his increased moveset that we'll get into a bit later. It's his 3D sections that really differentiate themselves. They're no longer speed tunnels that you're just blasting through. There's some of that. Yes, it's still a Sonic game, so you kind of have to have that stuff, but I feel like you have to pay a little bit more attention this time around, and that's largely in part to Shadow's abilities and how they're used in these levels. Going through them, per usual, you have the trusty homing attack, although it acts differently depending on what you're actually aiming at. On springs and objects, it acts the traditional homing attack. However, when targeting enemy, oh my goodness. However, when targeting enemy, I can't. However, when targeting enemies, Shadow will warp to them instead, which lends itself to some pretty cool traversal options, such as warping past a giant laser barrier. He also has chaos control that allows him to stop time in a level, so you can navigate different obstacles safely, or different hazards, you know, without risking damage. As well as get a better completion time because the clock stops. So you can use that to try and get high scores and times throughout these levels as well. And sometimes that's the main goal to some of these challenges. And there are also other abilities that Shadow will gain as you progress, which include his Chaos Spears, which he can shoot to disable enemies and activate switches. He has some sort of instant transmission on certain enemies that he can use. That's really cool to pull off. Dude remembered his surfing skills from Shadow the Hedgehog. He can become some sort of up symbiote as in web sling as well. Oh, and he can also fly with wings. All this stuff you have to keep track of while going through these levels, and it's not like a one and done thing. They steadily reappear after their introduction and are used in some pretty cool ways. And honestly, it can be a lot to wrap your head around when you're first going through this, but I do think the game does a good job at spreading these abilities out where it doesn't feel too overwhelming at one time. I feel like it's paced pretty well to where once you've gotten the hang of one ability, you're being introduced to a new one. And again, that pacing can vary depending on how thorough you are with completing these other challenges as you go through the game. But once you get the hang of everything, this new Shadow is honestly a real joy to play, and I hope we get to see more of him in the future, because the only thing that sucks again is that the core experience of this game is so short. By the time the ending came, I was really wanting to keep playing more, and there's not any more. That's not to say that once you beat the game, it's necessarily over. Again, there are a ton of collectibles to find and unlock in the hub world, as well as the levels themselves. There's a chase to S rank every one of the levels and challenge gates, as well as complete all the hub world challenges that they have here. And even in addition to that, there's a post game in this game in the form of the Doom Zone, which essentially is like a hard mode for this game. It increases the difficulty for different challenge gates, as well as the bosses, and adds a few new challenges on top of that. So there is a lot here in this package. I just personally wish that there was a bit more of that core experience navigating through new levels, that I grew to love here. To further glaze this game, you can't forget about the soundtrack. Just like in Sonic Generations, iconic music from classic levels returns in new arrangements. I mean, you don't have to look any further than the title screen to recognize that. And I don't know, there's just something about beating Metal Sonic's ass. Excuse me, Metal Overlord's ass. While what I'm made of is just blasting in the background, that just feels right. I don't know. The only thing, again, is that Shadow doesn't have the history of bangers that Sonic does, but what they managed to pull from and recreate here still slaps, and slaps even harder if you have the nostalgia for it. Lastly, let's mention the visuals of the game. It's fine. There's a reason why I bring this up close to the end, and it's honestly because there isn't too much to really say. The game definitely doesn't look great, but at the same time, it doesn't look offensively bad either. There are definitely points where I'm like, oh, okay, this looks pretty decent. Mainly when you're looking at like the character cutscenes, that's probably the best this game looks. Granted, that's when most games look the best. Other times there, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is bad. Again, I don't understand the glow that's on Shadow's spines. I don't know if that's supposed to like be some kind of way of showing off lighting or something. I don't get that. It is an upgrade to the roughness of Sonic Generations, but also that's like a 13-year-old game. So yeah, it should be, and a lot more if you ask me. But on the upside, the game did run smoothly. And I'd also like to add that the voice cast that has been voicing these characters for over the last decade plus now does a real good job here. Everybody feels natural in their roles, especially Shadow. Shadow was the one character that when they first switched the cast over, he didn't really sound good at all. But I think the guy that voices him now has found his stride as a character, and he does a really good job portraying the different states that Shadow can go through in this game. So kudos to the voice cast all around. So yeah, that's Sonic X Shadow Generations. Should you get this game? Well, if you're a Sonic and or Shadow fan, one, you've probably already played half of this. And two, you probably already bought this anyway. But in case you haven't for some reason, yes, this is a great package, especially if you haven't experienced the original game, then this is a must buy for a Sonic fan and a Shadow fan. If you have, however, experienced Sonic Generations in its previous release, and you're buying this really just for the Shadow part, I don't know if Shadow's portion really justifies the $50 price tag just off the content alone. Granted, it's not a full price game, but it's damn near close. But even still at that like slightly discounted price, I can't say I fully recommend it. There's a reason why these games are bundled together, and it's more than just the similar themes that they share. So if that's you, a fan that really only cares about the Shadow story of this game, I don't think I can reasonably recommend this at this price point. I'd wait for a price drop or a sale at some point. For the rest of you outsiders, if you want to experience close to, if not the best 3D Sonics had to offer in like the past 3 decades, then look no further than this game. On top of that, you get a pretty decent emulation of what the 2D games brought to the table back in the 90s. And to be honest, it's a giant history lesson as well as a glance into the future in some sorts. People still come back to this game for a reason. And if you're on PC, the mods that have been made for this game over the years are ridiculous. So you'll have endless fun, you know, trying out all that stuff if that's something you're into. Are there better platformers? Yeah, I mean, Mario exists. But if you've ever wanted to take a stab at a Sonic game, especially a 3D one, this one's in the upper echelon of those. So, those are my thoughts on Sonic X Shadow Generations. If you've played it, let me know. Again, do some of my grievances that I've had match up with yours, or am I just alone and having some of these issues? As well as, are you an older Sonic fan? Are you a new Sonic fan? Do you hate Sonic? I want all the details. Let me know in the comments down below. But as always, thanks for watching this video. I appreciate that you made it to the end here. If you want to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe, like, and share the video. And yeah, that's gonna do it for me. I'm Russ, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.